What a great day. We're so happy you could come by and see us. I know, Governor, you've been great. You're busy, and we like to see you here in Fargo to kind of see what's going on. Many of the members of the diversion were gone today, so it's kind of one of those crazy deals that happened. We did get some legislators to come, so that's great, and they want to hear what's going on. Dear friend Bernie made it, as usual. He always gives me a lot of advice, so I like to have him around. Shelley Carlsrud is at another meeting. She could not come today, so she's tied up in that. But what we're going to do today is you were very instrumental in the FM diversion. If you hadn't had the two governors meet, we never would have got it done. And we got through all the different things we need to do. And we're real excited because we're over the 50% mark on the project. It's moving along really nicely. And for us that live here all the time, every time you look, there's something going up or going more and build and everything like that. And I'm always struck with the enormity of the size of the project. And you, farm kid, you understand that, but how much acreage this involves and how much work this involves. And you watch those big dump trucks and they just fill them and go, fill them and go. But I think if you ever think of the amount of tonnage of dirt we move in the valley for this project, it's just unbelievable. But we're very excited about it. Things have been going very well. I'm going to turn the meeting over to you. You're in our chambers, but you're the boss, so whatever you want to go through on today. If you want us to introduce everybody, go through, we could do that and kind of inform you who is here, if that'd be okay. Yep. So, Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
Chuck Henderson, Morton City Council.
Kim Flacco.
Chad Peterson, County Commission.
Mary Sherrill, County Commission, Cass County.
Rick Steen, Joint Water Board.
Bernie Dardis, Mayor, West Fargo.
Steve Swantek, State House, District 10.
Greg Steeman, State House, District 27.
John Wrighton, Governor's Office.
Jay Spieler, Chief Staff for the Governor.
Andrea Travnik, Director of the Department of Water Resources.
And I'm Doug. We're not here to talk, we're here to listen. And of course, as people know, we've got as the outgoing governor, one of my responsibilities is to present the budget to the next legislature. I'll be doing that in the first week in December as the new legislature assembles. This is one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the history of the state. It would be important for us and for the legislators to have an update on sort of where we're at, where we see things going. We know a lot of progress has been made. We also know that as any construction project of this size, there's always challenges. So I think the key here is for us to get the ground truth, both in terms of the presentation, then get out on the ground this afternoon. And of course, flying in on a beautiful day today, the way the winds were, we were taking a little bit dip south, closer to Argusville. So I got some of the best, already had a little bit of a the northern diversion tour, but the downstream end of it this morning, it came over, just had great shots of all the progress that are down there. I could put them up on the slide.
Oh, yeah, put them up, please, for myself.
Anyway, it's fun to see the progress going from one end to the other on all that, and we're looking forward to getting out on the bus tour this afternoon.
Very good. Chris Bakagard is going to present. Could I just have, Chris, have the staff members that work for the diversion story stand up so they know who are people that are working here right now? If you would all stand up that are working actively on the project. So this is our team that's been working vigorously on it and making great progress. I think Jody's got most of the easements we need for the main part of it, and we're just working on the rest of it. And the team has been working vigorously. Mike, you're also working on it, so you have to stand up. You and Robert are helping their executive directors right now while we're finding a new executive director. But they have been doing fantastic work, and they're kind of quiet behind there unless they get in the press every now and then. But it's been great work, so thank you very much. Chris Bakagard's going to lead off.
And Chris, before you jump in, I do want to say to Andrea Travnik, the Director of Water Resources here today, thank you, Trav, for your leadership. But obviously, the way we're set up at the State Water Commission, 9-person board, Governor, Ag Commissioner, and then 7 appointees by the governor. But we did, with the legislators' support, reconfigure how we separated the state engineer from the leader of that agency. Andrea is the leader of the whole thing, and of course they've got accountability from the state side of overseeing the dollars in the project. And of course we're fortunate to have Trav here because she's one of the few people that we have in our cabinet who's got extensive experience both at the governor's office, the agency level, and at the federal level. And great to have her back in the state, and great to have her leadership helping guide forward. So I'm sure on behalf of her and her team, we'll have some questions as the day goes on too, but thank you for your leadership.
And Governor, just so you know, we have Representative LaFour and Representative Nathy also online.
Oh, fantastic. Great.
Welcome, Governor, and folks at the table. I'll give a quick presentation that for those of you that were at the Water Topics Committee, this will look a little familiar. We did update a little bit with some added information in the last couple of weeks, but just a quick overview of kind of where we are with construction today, and kind of wrap up with a summary of kind of where we're headed in the next couple of years to get our project completed. One of the items we do on a monthly basis for our board presentation is do a quick drone video update that gives a quick few-minute overview of kind of the highlights of construction for the last month. Mayor, I hope you don't mind, but this is actually the presentation we'll show you guys tomorrow at our board meeting. So we've hot off the presses. So this will be the first viewing of our drone update for September, and gives kind of a snapshot of some of the construction that's happened in the last month.
While building up to construct the bridges that will cross over it. Hi, I'm Tom Fuchs, the Senior Construction Manager for the Metro Flood Diversion Authority, with this month's project update. ASN constructors' teams have continued to dig down to excavate the stormwater diversion channel while building up to construct the bridges that will cross over it. In Reach 10, which is just south of I-94, crews are placing excavated material for the non-embedded levee, which must be constructed in warmer weather. Levee construction is also the focus in Reaches 11 and 12, further south. In Reach 13 of the channel, south and west of Horace, North Dakota, crews are digging the main channel and placing the excavated material berms on both sides. Close to another 2 million cubic yards of the necessary 45 million were moved in the past month, bringing channel excavation to about 57% completion. Work also continues on many of the 19 channel crossings. At County Road 20, ASN constructors started early to pour approximately 700 cubic yards of concrete needed for the bridge deck. North of there, at the County Road 22 crossing, bridge girders are now installed. Our drone view also captures nearby progress on the Maintenance Road Bridge crossing the lower Rush River inlet to the channel, which is one of several river and drain inlets under construction. Northeast of Argusville, North Dakota, near the diversion outlet, ASN Constructors is working toward completion of the combined County Road 4 and 31 crossing. Crews have now backfilled both abutments, including installing geofoam, a lightweight fill material that mitigates settlement, and they are beginning to construct the concrete approach slabs. Concrete bridge railings are also underway atop the bridge deck, which was placed last month. The new crossing is expected to open to traffic later this fall. West of the metro area on I-94, bypass lanes are now fully constructed and will be ready to open before winter. ASN has completed mainline pavement removal and constructed portions of the required grade raises for the new crossings. Crews also began driving H-piles as well as forming and placing concrete for the bridge's substructure elements this month. Over at the Maple River Aqueduct, where the river, rather than cars, will cross over the channel, ASN has continued constructing segments of the concrete flume base and has begun formwork and concrete placement for the first portion of the north flume wall. H-pile installation and concrete work has continued at the adjacent wing walls surrounding the flume and conduit structure as well. To date, about 9,500 cubic yards of concrete have been placed at the aqueduct. At the Red River structure, Ames construction is nearing completion of concrete work for the control structure. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers contractor also began driving sheet piles and H-piles as well as placing concrete at the flood walls east and west of the structure. Crews also began excavating and stockpiling roughly 460,000 cubic yards of impervious fill east of the Red River on the Minnesota side of the project. This material, which is enough to fill the U.S. Capitol dome more than 9 times, will be used to construct the embankment that will cross the Red River after the river is permanently diverted through the structure in 2025. A Corps contractor has also been working on the Oxbow-Hickson-Bocke ring levee. Hendrickson Transportation has completed more than a mile of the inspection trench. They've also completed about 3,000 of the 11,500-foot-long embankment using excavated material from the North Barrow Pond, one of 2 ponds that will be constructed as part of the project. Get more behind-the-scenes views of those working to make permanent, reliable flood protection a reality by subscribing to the Diversion Current at fmdiversion.gov/subscribe. The Diversion Current, working to make permanent, reliable flood protection a reality.
So those, for those that are interested, that's a nice quick mini tour that we do every month ahead of our board meetings. With construction going 24/7, 365, we also have quite a bit of activity throughout the winter months as well. So always something new to show. Don't see every part of the project every month, but those are all posted on our website following our board meetings each month. So real quick rundown. So again, our program's divided into 2 main programs. Third, with the city work, we're going to focus mostly on the channel and the southern embankment today for updates. But the first leg, diversion channel, which this is the piece that is being primarily funded with local and state dollars. So a very critical piece of our project for sure. We're going to cover a little bit. You saw a lot of things. Governor, I'm glad you got a chance to look at the very downstream end of the channel, because with 50 miles of construction right now, it's kind of tough to get everywhere in one quick trip. So we won't get all the way to the outlet today, but glad you got a chance to look at that. Again, we're making good progress on all of these features. This is a view of last fall, early winter of the diversion outlet. So we do have the outlet connected to the Red River. So the first couple miles of channel are functional. Once we get the 431 bridge open, we'll be able to open up the channel back to the interstate, BNSF and County Road 81 crossings as well, which will likely happen yet this fall. So kind of a quick overview of what the main channel looks like. You saw quite a few views of this. This is a similar view to what you probably saw in the 431 video. You can see the gray on the outsides. That's the material, extra material from excavating the channel, just being stockpiled adjacent to the channel for long-term storage. And then you look at the green areas, the main body of the channel, a small levee on the right side of the screen that partially embedded right into the material piles. Again, for the first several miles of the channel, we have a sinuous low flow channel to replicate for fish passage. Since we are dumping the lower Rush and Rush rivers directly into the diversion channel, we do have fish passage up through the Rush River and a structure being constructed on the Rush River to allow fish to climb back out into the main body of the Rush River as well. So at the Aqueduct, we will get a chance to see this today. The Aqueduct, Maple Aqueduct, is making good progress. As you saw in the drone video, they're starting to form and pour some of the walls of the flume to carry the Maple River across the diversion channel. Again, this was been under construction since early 23, and plans to be completed here in the fall of 25. Just a quick overview. Again, this will be a rendering of what the finished structure would look like. So from bottom to top of the screen, that would be the river crossing our diversion channel. And then from right to left on the screen would be the diversion channel flowing underneath that structure to carry floodwaters around the metro. Kind of a quick schematic, kind of a busy drawing, but just to give you kind of a spatial view, what you were just looking at is the aqueduct flume. And that's where the river will cross the channel. There also is a secondary spillway that'll be constructed off of the channel and into the diversion channel. So large flows that are coming down the Maple will be spilled directly into the diversion channel, again, to provide that reliable flood protection inside the protected area from obviously the red and wild rice flooding on the channel, but also to avoid flooding along the Maple River being brought into town as well. The natural channel right now flows just north of the site. You'll be able to see some trees along that today, and that'll just be connected through the aqueduct structure similar to the other large structures on our project. So real quick, we're making probably the most progress on bridges this year. Our mild winter really helped advance that construction in a large way. So Governor, if you can order another winter like last year, that'd be really good for our construction. So, but we've got bridges kind of in all states of construction generally from north to south. As far as advancement, the top left pictures, the County Road 431 bridge that Tom talked about in our video. That bridge will likely be completed yet this fall, along with maybe one or two others, depending on how the fall weather goes as far as getting roads open. Current schedule would be to have all of the bridges open next summer and fall. So we'll have transportation reconnected, and then they can continue with excavating the channel through those structures. And then on the south end, they're working on piling and preloads on bridges on the south end of the channel right now. Again, are advancing those pretty continually from north to south. Good progress being made also on the interstate and railroad crossings. Interstate 29, you saw in the drone video, they've got girders set and are starting to work on decking on the first of the two bridges on I-29. Again, working on the substructures on the I-94 bridge. I'll be setting girders on the first BNSF bridge here probably in the next few weeks, maybe 4 to 6 weeks on the Prosper Bridge, and then are also working on substructures on the Hillsborough crossing and are working on embankment and grade raise for the KO crossing north of 94. So a real quick rundown on where we are with the southern embankment. Again, this is the piece of the project that's being constructed using federal dollars by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Again, have the three main control structures for the diversion inlet, the Red River structure and the Wild Rice structure, along with then about 22 miles of earth embankment to protect the metro area from water coming from the south. We'll stop at the diversion inlet structure site today. This structure is virtually complete. They're waiting on some final gate equipment that we anticipate will be in and installed along with the monitoring equipment for the USGS gauges. That should all be in place sometime mid next year. But when we stop there today, there's no active construction. They're just waiting on that equipment, and all the safety rails and everything's in place. So looks like a very, very completed site, which it is, and kind of nice to see a structure that's virtually done on the project. The Wild Rice River structure is nearing that same point. They're working right now on the final pieces of catwalks and scaffolding and walkways right now, finishing up the bridge deck and the access roads, and that will be again virtually complete here this fall with the same schedule that by next spring they'll have that final gate equipment and USGS gauging station information and equipment installed as well. We're not going to be able to stop at that site today. The access road is a little bit suspect, so we just haven't been taking buses in there yet as far as access. Then the Red River.
Chris, can you go back one on the wild rice? I think if I remember in a couple of the big floods that we had, multiple ones, but on one of those, I think when we were at 29 CFS, 29,000, that almost half of that was coming down the wild rice, not the red. So just go a little deeper on this structure.
Sure.
And because floods may materialize in different ways, and we're not always going to have that sort of 50-50 split between the wild rice and the red, but a little bit more about how this works, what the capacity is, and how we're feeling about the design of this piece.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Governor Burgum. Yeah, the structures are set up, generally speaking, we have about a 60-40 to 70-30 split, with majority of the water coming from the red side of things. We have a lot of redundancy in our gates from a core design standpoint. They have to design for probable maximum flood. If you're familiar with how they do other dams around, like more earthen flood storage dams, they have to design for a very severe event. So on a normal event, we'll only have these gates open a few feet. So we have a lot of flexibility in balancing the gates between the red structure and the wild rice structure to make sure, again, that we're matching that 37-foot stage through town. So it will have, with very minor adjustments, we could very easily balance those flows between the two structures.
And so then there's a firm commitment to, with all parties, that 37 is the max through town, and you can dial based on flood conditions those two together to achieve the 37 through town, with some coming from one, or.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah,
if we have more coming down the wild rice, you can dial down the red and et cetera.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then we'll also have monitors, for instance, if the tributaries on the Minnesota side are contributing water that wasn't anticipated, we'll also be able to adjust the gates. So yes, the 37-foot stage through town up through the 100-year is the commitment of the project, and that's how our operations manuals are being written, for sure.
And then if say we have more, and then this is holding it back while we let it through, but is there, in the same case you had on the Rush River with the spillway, is there a way where this drops right into the diversion? I mean, or do you have a photo or a map like you had on the Rush River one in terms of how this one works?
I don't, but so what there is on here, and you can see maybe the start of it. What the Corps of Engineers has done is they've excavated a channel along the interior, or the wet side of the whole southern embankment, that connects the diversion inlet to the wild rice to the red. So there's a channel that cuts all the way through there. So under lower flows, that water will still stay connected. Under an operational event, most of the water just flows overland, but absolutely we have the ability. So the three gates work together. We balance the two river gates, balance the flows coming into town. So we use those to regulate the 37 feet. And then we balance the staging area with the diversion channel using the inlet gates. So we monitor that staging area, making sure we're staying within our parameters there, and send the remaining water through the diversion inlet gate to route water through. So yes, if there's, in larger floods, we just would send more water around through the diversion inlet structure and through the channel.
But it gets there through that wet side.
Yes, it gets there through the wet side channel, and in under like a 100-year event, there'll probably will be 7 or 8 feet of water right up behind the earthen embankment, so it also will flow directly overland. There'll be a direct connection just overland between all the structures during a larger event, for sure.
Thank you.
Yep. So we'll swing through today. If we can squeeze enough time out of the trip, we'll squeeze in and take a quick look at the Red River structure. Again, this is about 60% complete. As you see in this picture, one of the gates is in place and hung, and they're working on assembling the second gate. But a lot of great work going on here. Again, this structure is one of our critical pieces to get done, so I know the Corps is monitoring their schedule on this one very closely as it kind of bumps right up against our completion date for the ultimate opening of the project to make it operational. The gates here, just give you a quick rundown, get into some nerd stats, but the gates here there's 3 gates, as you can see, and they're each 50 feet wide and a little over 50 feet tall. They weigh a little under 200,000 pounds each. So they're incredibly large gates. Obviously around here, we don't produce a lot of those, so there aren't any manufacturing facilities really close. So they're making those down south and actually shipping them up in pieces. You can see the orangish strips on the gate is where they welded it together in the field. So they have a cribbing system where they put the gates together and then weld it in place and then touch up and finalize the painting actually on site for these. Quite a unique system, as they're used to down in the southern parts of the country, just putting them on a barge and floating them into place, since most of these are on active rivers, or are being kind of out in the middle of the country. They're using some pretty unique methods to get the gates shipped here and get them assembled on site and get them set into place. So it's quite a process to watch. And real quick, there's several reaches of the southern embankment that are underway, and then the last couple of reaches right now are in final design. I'll talk a little bit about that on the last slide, just kind of wrap up where we're headed in the next couple of years for the project. Again, one of the main projects we did and is again virtually complete, we're just doing final punch list, is the grade raise on I-29. Those 2 structures, Governor, are where the channel crosses, that interior channel crosses underneath the interstate structures to let water pass between the interstate grade raise. Again, we raised about 4 miles of interstate to make sure that as we operate the project, the interstate stays in operation south of Fargo. And again, that project is completely open. The interstate's back under normal operations. We're just finalizing final punch list and a couple warranty items that we're cleaning up on that, and that should be wrapped up here this fall. So real quick, I want to hit on, obviously, on a project.
One other random question, but on the, I know we crossed the interstate, like in your previous picture, also with the Cheyenne diversion. Is there, at a peak event, what would the role of the Cheyenne diversion is now entirely inside this diversion? Is it still operational in any way as part of an operational plan, or would it never be flows high enough that it would kick out, or is it the Cheyenne is so narrow through West Fargo that it would still kick in with the flows that are being admitted on the Cheyenne?
Yeah, there will be, it certainly won't be used as often or to the same magnitude, but there will still be a flow split at both Horace and at West Fargo where some water will flow through the Cheyenne and Horace diversion channels. It'll be much less, and we're taking those peak flows from 4,000 to 5,000 CFS down to about 1,500. And so that reduction is still a little more than the natural channel will handle. So we still will deflect some flows into those channels, just much less than would happen today naturally. So.
Yep, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So obviously a project this big, there's quite a few mitigation projects that we have. I just want to highlight a couple of things that we have completed just to show that we are doing our mitigation as we're also doing our other construction. We've got a couple of wetland mitigation projects that we've completed. One is we restored an oxbow that was part of the Oxbow, city of Oxbow, restored that and created a wetland complex there. So, and also in the more of the topsoil areas you see on this picture also were reforested to reestablish the river riparian area. Another one of the reasons some of our core counterparts aren't here.
Can you go back on that one? Would that be, the way we're looking at it, is that part of where some of the houses were bought out?
Yes, and part of the original golf course.
Where the houses are now, there's a levee there?
Yep.
And so then you're
this right here is now the levee. The piece of the levee is built right into the edge of the golf course that protects the new part of Oxbow. So yes, this was part of both our houses and where the golf course was. I bet they found thousands of golf balls out there when they were excavating this. You could see little white dots everywhere when they were reestablishing this grade. So yeah, you're looking at that exactly right, Governor.
And then the lower left is Minnesota.
Yes. Well, this right here is still North Dakota. This is just an oxbow. The river actually sits just off the screen behind us.
Okay.
Yep. So one of the reasons our core partners aren't here today is they are doing a groundbreaking and opening ceremony for the Drayton Dam project. Again, most here probably have heard my spiel on this, so I won't go too in depth, but one of the mitigation projects that we were asked to complete was to replace the last remaining low-head dam that hadn't been converted to rock riffles on the Red River system, was here at Drayton. We were asked as part of our mitigation for the operation of the gates on the Red and Wild Rice River to complete that project. Corps of Engineers took that on, did a really nice job. That project was virtually completed last fall, and they just were doing final cleanup and some tree plantings this summer and this spring and summer. So they're doing a groundbreaking and ribbon cutting ceremony up there here, probably happening here in the next 15, 20 minutes. So.
Yeah, our state engineer is up there today for the.
Awesome.
John's up there. But I recall this is one of the criteria that the state of Minnesota put on their approval. It was a contingent thing. So that's for the legislators that weren't part of those negotiations all the way up at Drayton. Minnesota said you don't get a permit unless you do this that far downstream. I'll stop short of any editorial. But
there's a lot of excitement around this from the resource agency side. I've already gotten reports of finding fish that were tagged that have been traversing all the way from Lake Winnipeg all the way through to the mouth of the Red River south of Fargo here. So I think there's good evidence that fish are moving. Not all of them move that far, but there is evidence that they're finding of the fish that are tagged in the river that are migrating quite a long distance and utilizing these structures to make their way to live their life and do their business. So
I want to say my implied editorial comment was not about the value of the project. It was about who was paying for it. That was
Fair
just
enough.
to make sure it's a really good project from
fair
a
enough, Governor.
biological standpoint. But
real quick, real quick on property acquisition, Mayor hit on most of this as he was kicking off the meeting. And there's probably a few updates to this. I didn't grab from the new board packet for this month, but we're virtually complete with construction footprint purchases. A couple of final eminent domain cases are moving their way through the cost side of things, so we don't show those as complete yet. And then we're making good progress, a little over half done with acquiring the easements in the upstream storage area as well. So making nice progress on all of our land acquisitions as well for the project. And with that, kind of just wrap up, I want to talk through a little bit.
For a reminder on the easements, they get to keep the land. We pay them an initial easement access, and then if there's a flood event, then is there an additional payments?
No, there's not. We've got a few programs that we're putting in place. So yes, we're making an initial easement payment to purchase the property rights for both storing water and for removing development rights from the land that is in place. And then from a ongoing perspective, we're putting in play 2 crop insurance programs to help with the producer side to reduce their risk from an operational event. And then in addition to that, we have our debris cleanup and restoration projects that we would do following an event as well. So no direct payments to landowners, possibly some reimbursements if they do some of their own cleanup, but no direct payments for storage of water. That's all purchased up front.
That's purchased up front, but if there were crop damage, then that's part of the insurance program.
Yes, absolutely.
So they effectively get paid for a premium for the land, and they get to keep farming it, and they get crop insurance.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 2 crop insurance programs, both a prevent plant if we had a late season flood that prevented them from planting, and a crop loss program if we had to operate the project in the summer and we caused crop damage from an already growing crop. Yep.
Question. You're right. I remember in the Senate Ag Committee, one of the questions that came up was weed control and who's responsible for that because people are going to be building their budgets, and if it's a political subdivision versus the, kind of owner or tenant along there, because there's a lot of ag people worried about, thistles and all sorts of invasive species, being transported north from land that's not theirs. So how does that work in terms of the responsibility of weed control?
Are you asking just on the general cropland or on the project footprint land or both?
On the easement type, where right along, yep.
Yeah, I'm not aware that there's any separate payments for weed control. I think that just stays with the producers to manage the weeds on the land. So real quick to wrap up, just want to talk a little bit about where we're headed next. This is another graphic that we use month by month to track progress that we share with our board. If you can see the colors, it's a tough map to put on a PowerPoint because it's oriented north and south, and I can't stand looking at graphics sideways. So bear with the format. But we are tracking progress. So you see everything that's in the tan color is under construction. So we are down to just having three segments of the core program that aren't under construction. And then we also are tracking completion, both from a functionally complete and an overall complete. And we've got 2 segments that you can see up on the north end where we've got the diversion outlet, a couple of channel reaches, and a drain inlet that are functionally complete. They're working on seeding for those now. But as we move forward, we anticipate, like I said, probably 1, 2, maybe 3 bridges will get completed this year. The remaining structures on the diversion channel are scheduled to be completed next year. Channel work will progress throughout this winter and through all of next year and then into 26. And again, as Tom reported today, we're past the halfway point of that excavation and on track to certainly finish that work. From a design perspective, we have finalized or will finalize our design packages for all the diversion channel elements this fall and winter. And the same with the Corps of Engineers. They actually are programming their last 2 segments, SE3 and SE5. They're working on final permit approvals through both North Dakota DWR and Minnesota DNR, and then are anticipating bidding those this fall. So we will have all the core work bid and under construction by next spring as well. And then working our way down through into 26, we anticipate, like next year, we would anticipate reaches SE1B, SE2A, and SE2B, which are basically everything west of I-29 to be completed for the southern embankment. And again, anticipate both the diversion inlet structure and the wild rice structure to be completed next summer. And then we would have just those remaining 3 segments of earthen embankment and the Red River structure for the core that would carry into 2026. And then again, we'd have ongoing channel construction. Again, the Maple Aqueduct is scheduled to be completed next fall. The Cheyenne Aqueduct would be scheduled to be completed the next summer in summer of 26. And then we'd have all the drain connections, and a lot of the work in 26 on the channel will be removing those natural plugs from roads and from drainages that carry across the channel today. And heading towards that functionally complete again for the fall of 26 to be ready to operate if needed in the spring of 27. And obviously there'd be some finished work, seed establishment, tree planting, those things that would carry into 27 and possibly even 28. So you'll likely see construction happening beyond our operational date, but that'll be finalizing things and cleaning things up and making sure we have everything established and ready for the long term. So. With that, that's all I had today, Governor. If there's other questions folks have, otherwise we can certainly cover some of those as we're driving through the project sites as well. So.
I hate to even think about this, but this is sort of the plan for the unthinkable. But if we were to have a large flood event in 25 or 26, some of this, functionally completed might be helpful. But have we done any scenario planning for where we might be, say, next year in terms of if we had an event, where we would be in trouble and where we would have some help from this work?
Yeah, we've looked at that a little bit, Governor, and without everything being completed and especially without access to the channel, there's a limited amount of benefit that we can get out of some of the features we're building. I think one of the biggest benefits we do have is we are virtually, I think we're almost 90% complete with all of our in-town work to protect the in-town to that 37-foot stage, which gets them up into that protected to practically up into that low 40s with very minimal sandbagging anymore. So we could certainly fight a flood event similar to what we had in 2009 or in those ranges in a much more manageable fashion today by having that work done. And that was a lot of our objective of advancing that work early and getting the in-town parts protected so that we could fight those moderate sized floods while we were working on getting the overall project completed.
We estimate sandbags, you'd only less than $1 million versus the 6-7 million bags we used to do. So we feel that if we had an event, we could protect that.
And wasn't our
Cat out of retirement if we had to do that.
but what was our peak on sandbags? Weren't we in the
7.5 million.
Yeah. I think just before we break to head out, I mean, I think I want to again thank the team and everybody that's working on this, and congrats on all the progress that we're having. But I think we have to just sort of touch base and remember why we're here. It's interesting that we all remember '97 and losing Grand Forks, and we were within 6 inches. And I remember standing with Mayor Furness on 52nd Avenue South when it was still a ag road with a ditch, and the water was inches from coming over the top of it. And we had a cold night. I mean, we were that close to losing Fargo. We lost big chunks of Wahpeton then. Grand Forks, I mean, it was, and then Grand Forks, it's like, oh yeah, they recovered, but this K-12 school district in Grand Forks their enrollment didn't exceed 1997 until 2 years ago. It was a full generation. It was over 20 years before they got back to having more K-12 kids. I mean, they went from over 50,000 down to 40,000, after they had to evacuate the whole city. And so you lose a whole generation of economic activity. And then Minot, which we were there last night, I mean, there still is a recovery effort going on there from 2011. That was 13 years ago. And then we know now, when we've gone through other calamities like the pandemic, 25% of the hospital capacity in the state is behind this diversion area. There's 60 K-12 buildings. There's multiple universities. The level of disruption, if our largest metro went under, would be again orders of magnitude more than what we've seen. We've actually had 2 cities that we've effectively lost in the state because of the flood control. And so when we manage it well, then people said, why did you need to do it? But I think we're tracking, when we started this project, we were over 50 plus billion. I mean, with inflation and with escalation, new construction and growth, I'm sure that we're over $60 billion of property value that's in the protected area. And I know that, hey, this is an expensive project, but on the ratio of what we're doing relative to that, and I think we also know from the history of Winnipeg that when they got their diversion built, there's a real mark in the curve where economic activity increased after that. People felt like everything from, hey, I can safely remodel my basement to, hey, I'm going to build a new corporate headquarters. I mean, the economic activity came, and I think that we'll say the same thing for this metro area. One question while we're all here still in public, we've been focusing a lot of, and of course, a lot of this activity, because of the nature of it, is happening on the North Dakota side. Is there any updates from the Minnesota side in terms of either the state of Minnesota, the Moorhead, anything that we need to know in terms of because obviously all the effort in construction and disruption and land purchase on our side is protecting a big swath of where the important where the property values are in Clay County are all concentrated in Moorhead.
I think Chuck could answer that.
Yeah, this shortly here. We're continuing to acquire parcels with our joint powers board, and I think that's going well. We're still going to the state legislature for funding, though, and we didn't get funding this year, so we're going to keep going back and back, to fulfill that funding from Minnesota side, just to shore up the in-town levies. So
And you have a sense of how much is Moorhead in force, or not, or Minnesota, state of Minnesota's in force so far, and how much more would you be asking for?
Bernie, you had a report from Shelley Carlson on the Minnesota side, and I think they'd had in 100 million so far, and I think we're a deficit of 50 million. Is that right?
And those, that $100 million are improvements that have been made on the Minnesota side, obviously. Yes, it's in the neighborhood of $100 million thus far. But the last legislative session, Moorhead did request 57 million?
Yeah, it's 57.
$57 million. And as you well know, Governor, the state of Minnesota didn't land on a bonding bill, so that there was no dollars allocated. And in Governor Walz's water budget, there was only $6 million statewide with the state of Minnesota. So it was, it needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
Mary, Curley?
Yeah, could I just add one other little, not little, but rather large thank you to Governor Burgum. This is amazing to see the progress that we've made, and there's been so many people that have worked on this project, starting out with Darrell Vanyo back in the day. And, you know, when I was chair, we were still trying to move that needle and get that, that permit from the DNR, the magic golden ticket. And if it wouldn't have been for you, Governor, and calling the governor of Minnesota, putting together the governor's task force, and getting a plan going, we wouldn't be all sitting here today. And I thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mary. And of course, we know what since then we've had our federal partners have been great. Our CODEL in North Dakota, Senator Hoeven, Senator Kramer, Congressman Armstrong, and our state legislature stepped up. In the city of Fargo, I mean, this is an unprecedented, even in North Dakota, the local share is the highest of any major project we've done in the state of North Dakota. So the locals have really stepped up. The state has stepped up, and I think we all know that from a federal standpoint, that as this moves forward, this is a model for perhaps how flood projects should be completed in the United States. I mean, that's said over and over. I mean, I think the Army Corps of Engineers, you talk to them, they're excited because this is one of the largest private-public partnerships that they've been involved in. So, again, I think it speaks well to everybody in the room, all the players we have here. We have a great team, but we have a reputation for figuring out how to get stuff done in North Dakota, and that's what we did here. This is just another example of something where a lot of communities get stuck and they can't overcome. They be creative, innovate, persevere. But this is a testimony to the nature of what this community is and what our state is. So it's a big team effort. So thanks, everybody.
And I just want to comment and thank Chris and his team. So we were fortunate at the end of July to host the Western States Water Council. So all the 17 Western states came out to see this infrastructure project. So it just shows how important that resource trust fund dollar is to get water projects off the ground and moving. I mean, you mentioned that Minnesota had $6 million for their whole water budget. So just important to continue to keep that on the table as well.
What are you managing this year?
Right. Yeah, so currently, right, we've been fortunate for the new dollars for this past biennium. It's been $630 million. And that's new dollars. Of course, we've got some carryover on top of that. But we still see a significant need here in North Dakota. We just did our water development plan because we're trying to plan for 25-27, and $1.4 billion is being requested just for the 2-year period. So it just shows not only for these flood protection projects, but water supply. So we just got to make sure that we're really trying to manage those dollars appropriately and do some priority projects.
Governor, Representative Nathie reached out and said he had a question online.
Great. Representative Nathie, fire away.
Can you hear me, Governor?
We sure can, Mike. Thanks for dialing in.
All right, thanks. I got a question. Maybe it's for Chris. A couple things. One thing with the Minnesota issue, that was the problem I had back in 19 about their involvement. As you say, they only had $6 million for all their water projects. What are the chances that we'll get that $50 million towards the project? And also, why is Minnesota chairing that committee when we're paying for the bulk of this project?
Yeah, I guess I don't
Can you hear
know.
me at all, or?
Yeah, I heard you. I don't know that I have a crystal ball on where the Minnesota funding is. I don't know if any of the board folks want to address that one.
I think we'll get the funding. It's just going to take a little time. I mean, we continually go back to St. Paul, and that's our top priority legislatively to get that funding for the diversion. So I don't know about the second part.
Okay. Well, it'd be nice to know since we passed the bonding bill, $870 million. It'd be nice for the state to know and have some control over that. I've been reading about some of the rebar issues in the paper and such out here, and I just am concerned about some of these things as we go forward. It's nice to hear that the project sounds like it's ahead of schedule and doing well. We had the same report to our committee in appropriations last session, so I appreciate that. But I'm just curious, are the current contract issues and the rebar issue, is that going to have any negative impacts on this project going forward? Will you still be able to complete this on time?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And yes, I don't see the rebar issue having major effects. All construction work is still ongoing. Again, I think RRBA acknowledges they're putting some of that in at risk, but they are continuing to construct work using their original plan. We do have the epoxy-coated rebar dispute in our dispute review board process. We're right now working with the North Dakota Attorney General's office on determination of whether those hearings are public meetings or not, so that we're working through that item right now. And once we have that resolved, we would be ready to take that epoxy-coated rebar item to the dispute board to get a final resolution to it.
And then, John Shockley, could you speak up to the joint powers? We had Moorhead and Fargo involved initially on the whole project. And I think, like the governor said, with having two states, that actually helped us when we went for federal money to find us working together. But the original setup, why Fargo-Moorhead have joint powers?
Yeah, thank you, Governor, Mayor. So the Joint Powers Agreement organizes the diversion authority. The chair position rotates between three different positions. Year one is the City of Moorhead Mayor. Year two is the Cass County President of their commission. And then year three is the Fargo Mayor, and then it rotates. The reason why the Joint Powers Agreement was created is that the river touches two states. There's multiple jurisdictions involved. So a Joint Powers Agreement was created to leverage the powers between Clay County, the City of Moorhead, City of Fargo, Cass County, and the Cass County Joint Water Resource District. So a mechanism was needed to share that power. The North Dakota entities do have the majority of the seats on the board, and so the chair position rotates just as a recognition that both Moorhead and Fargo are what are referred to as non-federal sponsors, as is the diversion authority. And so the chair was in part a recognition of the non-federal sponsor status, which under the core vernacular is an important status, means that they're ultimately responsible for the project. And so that was negotiated out among the parties because it's a cross-border entity.
Mayor? Does that help, Mike, on that answer? Could you hear that?
Yeah, yep, I could hear that. That was great. I have one other question for Chris, or if they have anything. Do you guys have a compliance engineer that looks over this project to make sure we don't have issues such as the rebar issue pop up?
So thanks for that question. Yeah, we have multiple layers of compliance. The first line of that is the responsibility of the P3 developer. They are responsible ultimately for delivering us a project that complies with the technical requirements. Our team does do audits of their paperwork and of their compliance work to verify that all of their compliance items are being checked and verified through their internal processes following their quality manuals.
One last question then, Chris. Was that compliance engineer the one then that found the rebar issue?
It was actually one of our team that was out in the field that noted that issue and brought it to the attention of the developer.
Do we have a sense of you said here's the body of universe of rebar that went in, how much of it went in at the spec that was expected versus a alternative spec?
As a general percentage, the bridge structures, the way they're building them, are about half and half epoxy bars and plain bars. So in that regard, they're very much following a very typical what you would see on a highway bridge. Probably the biggest item that would be a difference would be the vast majority of the bars in the Maple Aqueduct are plain bar, compared to there's a small amount of that in their design was epoxy bar. So that's probably the largest deviation in the technical requirements as we see them. We did execute an agreement with our RVA to install epoxy bars in the Cheyenne Aqueduct, so we do have that one covered no matter which way the dispute goes. And from there's a few drainage inlet structures that do have plain bar in them, and we would have required epoxy bars. So overall, I don't know the exact percentage, Governor, but it's probably 60% of the bars are being placed as plain that we would have expected to be epoxy bars, but not all.
And is there a substantial price difference or with supply chain, or what was?
Not a substantial difference. It is more expensive to both purchase and to install. You have to be a little more cautious with the epoxy bars to not damage the coating. And then there's a slight cost increase for actually producing those bars and putting the coating on them, but not a substantial difference through what we've seen from data over the years.
Okay, thank you. We've got Chad, and then we'll go to Steve after that.
Yeah, Representative Nathy, this is Chad Peterson. Thanks for the question regarding the rebar. What may be helpful, and Governor Burgum, this would be helpful to you and your team as well, as you transition out onto whatever's next for you. Hopefully it's something in DC, but whatever's next for you, Governor. I think that we are preparing, our staff internally is preparing a summary report because we have a lot of new faces showing up on the Diversion Authority. Myself and Commissioner Shirley are both termed out, so we'll have at least 2 new faces, presumably, unless Mickey Mouse gets 40,000 write-in votes. Senator Flacco will become Commissioner Flacco in my district. But Representative Nathy, you know how this election could go with Tim running, but you know, love you, Tim. So this report is actually going to, whether you're doing a shed in your backyard or whether you're doing a $3 billion ditch around a bunch of metro areas, you're going to have questions, you're going to have concerns, and you're going to have differing opinions on how things should transpire. Part of this design was innovation, bringing our design team in through our P3 partnership to make this thing better based on what other design engineers thought may or may not be the best result. This summary report is going to be, it is really in the weeds, and we just got our first initial full summary of it just a couple days ago on our email. But this is really going to get into the weeds, literally and figuratively, on all the issues we have outstanding, all the thoughts we have outstanding, as well as scheduling and other construction updates. Again, it may be too much, but I'm a too much rather than too little. So I think it would be handy once we get this thing into its next stage of evolution, getting it to the governor's office, getting it to our friends in Bismarck for the legislative session. And again, its principal reason is because we have so many new faces showing up locally here as well. This report would really help you get your mind around what's really happening in terms of detail. And again, it's probably too much, but I'd rather have you too much than too little.
Thank you, Chad. Representative Swantek.
Thank you, Governor. Question, Chris, for you is, at our water interim committee that we had here in Fargo about a week and a half ago, it was discussed about the dispute review board, which is comprised of, and correct me if I'm wrong, comprised of experts in the field reviewing this whole epoxy issue. The agreement also states that you continue with the project even though it's in mediation. A question that we didn't ask, but some of us have now, is let's assume that the review board determines that they should have used epoxy rebar. Then what happens with the part that didn't have the rebar in it? What's the step then?
Yeah, the step at that point, no matter which way the dispute board finds, and assuming then that both make the assumptions that both groups accept that decision, that otherwise would kick in the mediation and the litigation part. But assuming both sides agree, it would end up being a negotiation between the authority and RRVA on what the disposition would be of the work that was done. If we were successful out of compliance, if they were successful, what would it be to put the epoxy bars into the project in areas where it wasn't already or hasn't been incorporated yet? It would be a sit-down negotiation to resolve that issue amongst the two partners of the project.
Greg?
Thank you. But there wouldn't be any deconstruction. They wouldn't go back and deconstruct any structures, would they?
Most likely not. It's not saying that couldn't happen, but it would be unlikely at this point that something would be completely deconstructed, yes.
Okay, and the reason I ask is the Dispute Resolution Board, that's a recommendation. Practically speaking, I'm guessing that regardless of who loses, this is going to go to litigation. Is that a safe assumption?
I guess, yeah, time will tell. I don't know if folks would be accepting of whichever decision is made. That's, I guess, pretty speculative at this point, but
no, and
certainly could happen for sure.
Right, and that's one of the things I wanted to, and I don't know, we obviously have legal counsel, we have consultants. Are they incentivized as far as getting things done on a timely manner, on time, on budget? Is that anything in the contract when it comes to outside entities that we're paying good money for?
Or is your question related to RRVA, our developer, or our internal teams? I guess I wasn't sure.
Internal team.
Okay.
Consultants and legal counsel.
Yeah, our incentive to all of our partners is we need to get the project completed. We need to follow the contract and administer the contract as it's laid out. That's our primary mission, and there's no extra incentives. We just pay our folks to do their professional jobs for us.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Say, Chris, one other question. Chris?
Yes.
Back to Representative Stevens' question about deconstruction. So if you go through the lawsuit and you got to deconstruct some projects, how is that paid for? Does a diversion come back to the state for additional money, or what happens financially? Do you guys come to us for more money, or what?
If we're found to be successful and some part of the project needs to be reconstructed, that would RVA's risk to cure on behalf of us. So no, I wouldn't anticipate we would need to come back for additional funds.
Okay, thank you.
Greg and Mike, one of the things you have to remember is that when they've done the P3 project, it goes 30 years. So it's not like you get your house and then you pay your mortgage for 30 years and you can come back to the contractor and say, hey, you screwed up at 20 years out and you need to fix it. This thing is guaranteed in a sense for 30 years. So if it laid it out back because the rebar wasn't used, if a bridge breaks down or something breaks down, they would be responsible at their expense to pay for it. So it's a little different than a mortgage. They basically have to maintain this thing for 30 years, and any kind of breakdown or anything that happens, that's on them. And if they cheapen something in their construction, then it's on them that they cheapened it and it broke down earlier than it should have. But it's not like a mortgage where we went to the bank, got a mortgage, and then something happens 20 years from now. They don't turn it over to us for 30 years, so they should be paying for everything that comes up.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions? Hearing none, again, just thank you, Chris. Thank you, team. Thank you, Mayor and others on the Diversion Authority for hosting us here today. And we're looking forward. I'm sure we'll have more questions when we get on the ground. But thanks for hosting us today.
We're glad to have you. You're all over the nation, but we're glad you stepped in Fargo, and we're going to go out and take a look. So good.